banking crises. He's also employed by the central bank in Jamaica, and so he's not a full-time student, although he's full-time this year. And I'm making sure he works. So, where's the gun gone? You've got the gun. Off you go, G.D.
Okay, so my topic is modeling sovereign debt-induced banking crises, theory, application, and policy implications. Not very imaginative because the theme of the conference is theory, application, and policy implications. Essentially, what I'm looking at is financial sector crises that are actually induced by the mismanagement of public debt. And up to recently, if I were talking about this topic in maybe 2002, 10 years ago, persons would have said, why are you looking at this in the first place? Because, well, it's irrelevant. Fortunately, right now, I don't have to give much of an introduction. We have examples in Greece, we have examples in Cyprus, where public sovereign debt crises actually lead to banking crises. Just as an interesting statistic, between 1970 and 2007, there have been 124 documented cases of banking crises. Only 26 of these have been twin crises, meaning a bank crisis plus a currency crisis, or a bank crisis plus a sovereign debt crisis. 8 of these can be classified as a triple crisis. So you're talking about a crisis where you have a currency, a banking, and a sovereign debt, in whatever order it may come. Why I bring up that qualification is that we're talking about low frequency events. These are not events that happen every other day. So it's not like the non-performing portfolio for a bank, where you have thousands of creditors and you have lots of data. And that presents part of the problem or part of the challenge. So what am I looking at? I'm looking at whether or not there is a relationship between the sustainability of a country's debt profile and the stability of the financial sector. Up to 3 years ago, people would have said there's really no relationship. And then, of course, we had the global financial crisis, and we're still in the European debt crisis, and pretty much you just watch the news and watch it unfold. So, in a sense, it's become more of a rhetorical question from a historical perspective, but from a theoretical perspective, it's still a relevant question because there are no theories to explain the connection between these two things. And the main reason for that is, although I'm straying from my topic, but the main reason for that is macroeconomics and finance have evolved as two separate disciplines. So the macroeconomists sit here and they work out what's happening on the superstructure of a country, and they assume that the financial analysts are going to be doing their bits. And then the financial analysts over here are taking everything in the inflation, GDP as exogenous, and just looking at portfolios and optimizing portfolios. And essentially where those two fields intersect is really where you have, or where they intersect in a bad way is where you have the kind of phenomena that we're evaluating. And so the other question leads to the other question, whether or not you can systematically measure these sorts of crises ex ante. The reason why you want to measure it ex ante is because if you can't measure it, then you can't address it from a policy perspective. And so the question is, can you do so? We know that after it happens, you can say, okay, the bailout of Cyprus was how much billions of euros, and this was X% of their GDP, but can you do that in an ex ante sense? So there's an extensive literature which started, I think, back in the 1990s, and it's known as the early warning systems literature, and basically these are frameworks which are developed and designed to alert policymakers as to impending crises, whether those crises are currency, sovereign debt, banking, and there are a couple other types of crises. So there's a whole literature on this, and so these are intended to be forward-looking instruments, frameworks, to promote an ex-ante approach to regulation. They have limitations, however, and hopefully on this slide I want to point out some of these limitations. Generally speaking, they go in one direction. So you have a scenario, and so you sit as a group and you